Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the NITheCS Colloquium. I hope our participants online can hear us as well. My name is Francesco Petruccione, and I'm the director of NITheCS. And this afternoon, it's a really great pleasure to have Dr. Mark Nasila with us. Mark has just published a very nice and thick book yeah, that we want to present and discuss this afternoon. Yeah? Maybe before I explain briefly what we plan to do, I will quickly introduce Dr. Mark Nasila, and then I will introduce the panel members, and one of them is online, and maybe Hank can make a plan to show him somewhere in a little window at the top. So Mark has a PhD in mathematical statistics of the Nelson Mandela University, and he's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer of First National Bank. Yeah? He's also a lecturer at the Singularity University. He's a very renowned speaker in various forums and conferences. And since several years, he has a strong link to NITheCS because he was a member of the interim steering committee of NITheCS, and hopefully he will be a member also of the permanent steering committee of NITheCS going forward. He has also another link with Stellenbosch University. He's a research fellow in the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking. Yeah? And he's a professor of practice in AI at University of Johannesburg. Yeah? So a very busy person. Yeah? And Mark does not only speak about AI, he also does AI because he's responsible for all the data and AI-specific innovations of F&B. And if you're an F&B customer, you probably know what I'm speaking about. If not, he will tell you just now. Yeah. Okay, so on the panel, we have also Kanshu Rajaratnam. He's the director of the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking. We have Professor Brian Ganson, also based at Stellenbosch University, and he's an expert of all things complicated and difficult. Yeah. So if you have a crisis to manage, a political disaster, a social catastrophe, ask him. He will help. Yeah. And we have also online Professor Bruce Bassett, and I hope, can we see him, Yank? Bruce is a professor at UCT. He's an astrophysicist by training, but developed a heart for all things AI and does AI in many aspects, from science to other more practical applications. So we are here to discuss the book by Mark, yeah, called African Artificial Intelligence. And I was told by Mark that the original title was Discovering Africa's AI Identity. Yeah, and you can see it here. It's quite a monumental book. Yeah, it's 400 plus pages, but it's a very good read. I finished reading it last night because I would have felt very bad to speak about a book without having read it. Yeah? And it's a book that covers most aspects of AI, yeah, but of course, as the title suggests, from an African perspective, yeah. And what is really interesting is that it tries to convince all kinds of organizations, yeah, from industry to the financial sector, of course, to universities, schools, retail sector, you name it, yeah, that they have to embrace AI and engage with it, yeah. But not just talk about it, also do it, yeah. And what I really learned from Mark's book, yeah, is that it's really important to have an AI strategy and implement it, yeah. And implementation means you need a really serious change management plan, yeah, because it's very easy to talk about things, it's not so easy to do them, yeah. But if you don't have a plan, the experience shows it doesn't work. Yeah. So we will discuss the rest of the book. And I think maybe it is now appropriate to ask a first question to Mark. Yeah, Mark, what motivated you to write such a book? As a busy person, you probably had to do some sacrifices to write it. Yeah.
At first, I thought I had a lot of time. But I think it was more of a reflective decision. 3 years ago, it was clearly visible that AI as a technology is changing everything, changing the way we live, the way we work. And I think it was even evident when ChatGPT was launched. Um, the, the current reality we've been facing over the last 10 years has meant that every sector, every industry cannot keep on doing things the way they were doing. We have society challenges that require us to rethink our approach to solving them. We've got geopolitical issues which we're facing every day. We've realized that there can be a war between Ukraine and Russia, and it actually affects us directly. We've got emerging risks ranging from climate, cyber, as well as some of the global policies around legal, as well as data protection that have meant that every single sector has to reach out to AI and data as mature technologies to not only navigate that reality, but to also keep up and prepare for a different future. But if you look at what's happened in Africa before, when other technologies have been there, we've always played a catch up. That's why we're very, very behind in a lot of very mature industries. A part of it is because we've not always strategized well. The second part is African nations don't have big economies to make mistakes. The early adopters, America, China, made a lot of mistakes, but they've got big economies. We've got a lot of social problems, and I felt we have a unique opportunity to help create a future we want. Maybe an opportunity in the next 50 years that will not come again as easy as this one. And when I say easy, it means that the future of AI is not fully defined. Even though we're behind, we have an opportunity to leverage it to create to create the future we want. We want to make sure that the next generation comes in a continent that is industrialized, less social issues, where we're talking about things like employment are not a real problem. And that's why I wrote the book, so that every day's person can be a part and parcel of this journey. In a lot of scenarios, we've seen data technology have always left to only leaders or the technologists themselves to make these decisions. But we need everyone to be part and parcel of this conversation so that we can make these decisions.
Thank you very much. Maybe you mentioned the geopolitical dimension of AI, and maybe that's a good idea to start from the global perspective. Yeah? And we have here a specialist. Brian, what are your thoughts?
So I was really intrigued by your use of the word sovereignty together with African AI. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. And if I could just press one level below that, my understanding of AI is that it is premised on the notion of there being an enormous amount of data available to us. But on the other hand, most of the data on Africa is people talking about Africa who are not from here. We are dependent on the World Bank, on European institutions. We have easy access to what Agence France Presse says about Africa, but we have no access to the radio feeds about Africans talking to Africans about it. So could you talk about just this, share with us your thoughts on, first of all, this overarching concept of African sovereignty, but then what would it also mean to have data sovereignty?
So when we talk about AI sovereignties, the ability of a country to take control of its data, its the processing of that data. And in this instance, we're talking about the use of AI to process data to create services and products, but to also be in control of the value that comes out of its data. Why is this important? If you look back at history, there is no country that has realized its potential by outsourcing the processing of its resources. You can look at gold, countries that had so much gold, countries that had platinum, or even just agricultural products. The second part, there is no country that has realized its potential by outsourcing the intelligence of processing its resources. The resource we're talking about today is data. And therefore, if we're going to lose control of that value, it's going to directly impact our sovereignty, our ability to create industries that will result to services and products needed not just within our society, but also to the world. The other aspect is that the process of creating services and products is what will be industrialization. And we need people to do that. And therefore, the need for people is what will actually create jobs. And this has to be factored out in a well-crafted strategy to prioritize industries that will provide services that are needed. And basically, that's a construct of sovereignty. Yes.
Please.
So, Mark, you mentioned, sovereignty, and when I think of sovereignty, I think of individual nations, right? And your book is not artificial intelligence, but African artificial intelligence. So, what are the, and you mentioned data and you mentioned human capacity. What are the other challenges, and opportunities there is for, implementing data solution or AI solutions in Africa, and how do you overcome them? And secondly, because we are talking about African AI, how do we overcome the challenges of collaborating across institutions, across countries, etc., to provide solutions for the continent? So not just, let's say, us here in South Africa or Nigerians in Nigeria, but across Africa.
So we've seen the past couple of years, America come up with their framework for responsible AI. Europe just published one. I think China has also published one. And the need to do that is, one, first of all, building trust in the technology that it is safe. The second part is a shared vision of what we want to achieve with the technology. The reason why we're very disjointed is because everyone is trying to achieve something. And a common vision makes us have a value conversation around AI and not the technology itself. Because today, an everyday person is not so much concerned about the technology, but the value that comes out of it, whether it's in the education industry, whether it's the health sector, or the transport or retail sector. The third one is, which is very important, is literacy around AI, because for AI to work for us, everyone must understand how AI works, its limitations. There's so much misconceptions and fears about AI. In fact, I think we're much more worried about people with bad intentions using AI to control the world, whether through misinformation or disinformation. So if people understand how AI works, then it's easy to tie it to the vision, and it's easy to trust it. And also, we want everyone to play a role in helping, redefine the role of AI, and that is very critical. It's everyone's conversation.
Maybe we should offer Bruce the opportunity to say something. Bruce, as an AI practitioner, what are your experiences in the context of what Mark was just sharing with us?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Francesco. Yeah, I was going to just say, I think we all agree that countries in Africa, we don't want to be left behind. So Mark, do you have some examples of successful AI strategies in Africa where countries have got some wins? Because I think having great examples makes it easier for people to imagine themselves doing the same thing.
Yeah, so we have about 8 or 9 countries in Africa that have published a vision or at least a strategy of what they want to do. But we don't have fully implemented strategy in Africa. We've got pockets of competence application of AI. And in South Africa, the banking sector, is very advanced. Actually, it's advanced than Europe banks or even in America in leveraging technology to provide services to monitor transactions and processes for any desirability. We have the health sector. I think we're already seeing doctors start to use robots to perform complex operations. I recently traveled to France when I was on my way back. One of the doctors told me they're able to proactively detect heart attacks and even avoid operations which would have needed to be done. Zambia is doing very well. I was surprised. They're much more focused on mining because they want to create safer environments because it's very dangerous, as well as agriculture, precision farming. We're seeing it crop up. We're seeing the payments industry in East Africa, leverage technology to understand behavior. That's why M-Pesa has become so popular, even though there are issues around regulation around it. So we've got pockets of implementation, but we don't have fully fledged AI. North Africa is also, investing in capitalizing on tourism. But I think once we have fully defined strategies with areas where countries want to focus, then we will be able to see more implementation.
Do we have a South African AI strategy?
So we don't have a South African AI strategy yet. I think they are frameworks which are being put together. But it is important. I think Zambia just published one, Rwanda published strategy. Mauritius has a strategy. In fact, I think Mauritius is ranked #1 in terms of AI maturity. We have, I think Morocco, Algeria have published strategies. Some have published frameworks for recommending and how AI should be strategized. And I think Senegal or Cameroon have also published a framework.
Yeah, as we have this conversation, one of the things that interested me in your approach to the book was you addressed both our societal vision, how do we want to develop as Africans in Africa, but also the enterprise level. How should a company be thinking about putting this into action? One suspects that some of your own challenges on that path inform that advice. I wonder if you can help us reflect on what parts of this should we be thinking about as a good of the commons. So just as an example, it probably doesn't make sense for everybody to be collecting and processing terabytes of data on public health or on other public information. On the other hand, probably not realistic to think that FNB could or should hand over its customer data. So how do we think about what parts of this challenge we deal with as a challenge of the commons, and which part are we just going to have to accept that market players with market motivations are going to be going their own way?
Yes. So making AI work is so difficult, very difficult. And, I'll give you an example. As much as there's been so much investment in AI, I think the automobile industry leads the pack with 9% of them, or maybe 10%. The health sector across the world, 3%. The finance sector, 1% have evidence of fully transforming their functions with AI. We're not saying there's a lot of POCs, but POCs are very expensive. If you think about it. In fact, it takes up to about 3-4 years to actually get back to go even on the investments. It shows one thing is that becoming AI driven goes beyond just putting money in it. You have, first of all, the shared vision. Data is a very big one. And I think we talk about data centric AI. And the reason we say that is it's easy to get your first solution working by focusing on the data you need and not necessarily all the data that's available. In fact, a lot of organizations spend a lot of money trying to centralize their data sets, creating what they call a single view or central view of data. It's actually, and it's almost impossible. The other building blocks that we need to think about, for example, ethics. And ethics at an application level. And that is a core of the identity we talk about, because the ethical risks are very unique in our setting. In China, people don't like they actually don't refer to themselves with the name and surname. So you could have a very good algorithm, but if you don't think about the cultural implication, it's a deal breaker. There was a case by Target where I don't know if you heard about the father who found out about the daughter being pregnant. In Africa, there's certain communities where pregnancy is kept as a secret. So even if you know about it algorithmically, accurately, there's certain limitations that will actually erode trust in AI. Then just implementation. If you don't integrate AI in your processes, then you won't get the value of AI. So that is actually the biggest challenge. We have a lot of algorithms, but they're not integrated. We all use Uber, we all use ChatGPT because it's implemented. There's a service that you get out of it. And Francesco mentioned change management. The top tech companies are very brutal with change management. In fact, every time you find they even let staff go because they're not, being part of the change. Because once you have a technology, you have to start working differently to realize that value. And we've seen in the organization that people are fearful, but we also have resistance. And if you do not drive change strategically, you're likely to be left behind. And this change we're talking about is a paradigm shift. It's not just something you say, no, listen, we're moving from an iPhone 13 to iPhone 14. It's massive change, both mentally for people, but also the way we work. So all these building blocks have to be considered to make sure that you get AI to work.
So, Mark, you mentioned earlier the national strategies and national frameworks, right? And we know in many cases of technology in the history, in past history, private entities tend to move a lot faster than government, right? And AI is evolving quite fast. So, what role does the private sector have in developing these frameworks, national frameworks, and national strategies?
So, if you reflect during COVID, COVID forced all the sectors to work together. The magnitude of opportunities that AI come with are actually very similar to COVID. In talking about industrialization, becoming an efficient country, the private sector is interested in serving a very efficient economy. And for that to happen, that collaboration has to be there. In the book, I talk about what's called the fourth sector. And the fourth sector basically is a functional integration of the three other sectors so that we can have the ability to industrialize and solve for some of those challenges. One of the key problems we have in African nations, we spend a lot of money on problems. And those problems require all sectors to work together. Safety and security cannot just be solved by one sector. The health sector, education, tourism, agriculture requires all sectors because you need each of these sectors has to contribute something in this ecosystem so that you can have an operating model that, either contributes towards solutioning or helps redesigning the future. And in some of the applications, it's not just about automating, it's about totally creating a new future so that we can get what we want.
So if I can ask something, we spoke about the public sector, the private sector. What about the academic sector? Bruce, do you want to say something on that topic?
No, I'd love to hear Mark's view on how it should impact education, research, science.
So if you think about it, the top 10 technology companies have been built on academic research. But what they've done very well is to industrialize and commoditize products. And up to today, some of the, the employees in these companies actually have to operate from high institutions. But that's also a strategy. When you look at the education sector, I think one, we have to, our challenges are very unique compared to other countries that are much more advanced. One is that we've got a shortage of teachers or personnel, especially in the science and technology fields. Secondly, is that there's so much manual aspects of teaching that that teachers don't spend time enabling learners learn. Then we also have, for example, the education systems are not so accommodating for example, disabled students or even special types of needs. And this is where technology has to come in to automate a lot of things like assessment, setting of exams, and to provide that personal touch. I mean, in Dubai today, calculus is taught by machines and scaled by machines. So tutorials, personalized learning by monitoring performance at an individual level and understanding what are the weaknesses that students have can only be enabled by technology. So it's about reimagining the future of learning and how learners can acquire education, but also just to make some of the curriculum relevant, because we realized that people perform well when they are focused on their strength and other than just a conveyor belt system where you just pass exams and you're not able to apply your knowledge and skills.
Thank you. Bruce, are you happy with the answer?
Yes, I'll take this chance to ask Mark another question. So, Mark, I think it's true that a lot of South African industries are quite conservative and quite very pragmatic, and so probably quite resistive to trying out AI at scale. What would you say are the top one or two things that you've heard executives say about not adopting AI strategy? And what have your responses been to convince them to do it?
I think the first one is AI is biased. I think we hear that every day. But the reality is that if you look at the value chain of AI, it's a series of human decisions. AI does not invite itself to the table. We say we want to use AI to become efficient, to scale decisions. And when you reflect on every single thing that has gone wrong with AI, the root cause was a human weakness. So we actually also have, as much as we want artificial intelligence, we still have to work on human intelligence to be able to create this future of human and machine partnerships. The second part is, which I keep on hearing, that we're not ready. And that is the story is like, no, what we have is already working, we're not ready. But the truth is that there'll never be a time where you're ready, because you have to start and grab this opportunity. It takes a long time to be mature in implementing AI. So you have to start somewhere, and you have to be ready through simple applications. Then the other part is just organizations don't have strategies and they approach it from a technology perspective. And I think we human beings like cool things. We like, when you prompt a technology, it generates text, and there's a misconception that if you just throw money to a technology, then things tomorrow will work out. Put money today, tomorrow everyone will be using AI. It takes more than that. So organizations and the executives have to think about all the building blocks that are required to make AI work. And the last one, Bruce, is just general literacy on how AI works. And most importantly, its limitations, because people expect AI to do everything, but there's certain things AI can actually not do, especially things that require strategizing, require empathy, things that require the human warmth. And that is where we're seeing big problems. So you end up having a technology conversation without a vision. And if you have a vision, you'll be able to understand, okay, this is what AI is going to play. These are the limitations at an application level, and plan that properly.
So a follow-up question. So, you said, companies or organizations say we are not ready. So how do you, I think one of the problems is, the industry leaders, industry captains, given where they come from, how long they've been in their roles, they may not have the capacity to think of, but what is possible? So how do you build that capacity among industry leaders to, see this vision of what AI could do? Also, I think, a large proportion of our CEOs in South Africa of big firms come from one unique degree, right? So how do we change the mindset to see what AI can do to help in the organization?
So the first thing is, I've always, we've done this at FNB, is run very unique literacy programs. And there's certain areas where run literacy programs where one data scientist to upskill and understand modern algorithms. But the magnitude of AI has meant that even boards are worried about the future, not just from missing out opportunities, but also risks that could come with AI. And we had to design special literacy sessions to empower them within their capacity to be able to make decisions. The third part is identifying low-risk opportunities to demonstrate value. That's very important, and because those ones now create scenarios of what if, because the potential value can be demonstrated by simple use case, and the use case will convince others to change their mindset and identify similar opportunities. I think the mistake we see in a lot of organizations, people want to start with a Rolls Royce, and it doesn't work in AI. You have to start, with the automating simple tasks that can help build confidence to advance to even a more more complex task.
So, and maybe following up on that, would you have some really practical advice to educational institutions such as universities? Yeah, because you mentioned that some sectors in South Africa are already world leading in the use of AI. Yeah, what should a university do to become world leading in the use of AI?
So already I think South African universities are doing very well in championing research in the building blocks of AI. Just talking about statistics, mathematics, computer science, data science. But I think what we see is having centers of excellence that can not only inform other industries, but can also attract collaboration between sectors. The industry does not have time to do research. They mostly apply these technologies. And therefore, that collaboration or model where research is happening can help power universities, but also focusing research in what is needed. We see a lot of research, but there's a big gap between where solutions are needed versus the research that is taking place. So we know very well some of the problems we have around, the health sector not being efficient enough, the education system itself, seeing the agriculture industry. So those industries that will take us to the next level is where research is needed.
And I'm going to follow up. I'm just so you know, I'm generally the dark cloud around every silver, the dark lining around every silver cloud. And so one of the things I want to address in following up on that is one of the things I experience as we start harnessing more and more data is that when we get it right, we actually do hold up a very different mirror to the stories that are being told about what's happening. So for just as a very concrete example, I used to be relatively good friends with an international financial institution until our data and analysis started to show that contrary to their narrative, their investments were increasing conflict and had no developmental impact. So their net value was negative for Africa, right? Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, they don't call me a lot anymore. As we get into health, as we get into education, the availability of better data and analytics is going to be really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I'm wondering, if you would address this revolutionary potential and the likely pushback we may get from some of our leaders who aren't ready to have that mirror held up in that way.
So I think traditionally we've approached either the use of data or technology adoption in a very defensive way. And this time we need to take risks within reason. We've always been, okay, I need to protect this data so you can't have access to it. But for you to create solutions, you need that data to be used to design solutions we need. So the defensive mindset is not necessarily going to help us. In my view, every leader is responsible for driving innovations that are needed, but they are also responsible for driving the responsible and ethical use of the way data is used to solve problems. But there must be accountability. I've always said all of us here can have a promise about something, but the value of any strategy is what you measure. So safety on data must be measured. The value of what you promise. If you're saying we're going to provide customer experience, then show me what you're measuring. If you're saying we're going to modernize how we provide lectures, then show me what you're measuring. The same thing applies, the principles around data security and safety. But also, it's important that people take risks within reason so that they can come up with better solutions.
Kanshu, please.
So I want to ask, a practical way of doing that. So imagine I'm a CEO in a firm. I want to bring the benefits of AI to my customers, but of course, people have real issues or concerns about data privacy. Not just data privacy, but the equitable use of data, right?
Yes.
And the equitable use of AI. So how do I, as a CEO or industry captain, trade off these two in a practical sense?
So I think the first stage of coming up with a solution is understanding what you want to solve. We spend at least 6 months just going through an ideation process and understanding what are the most what are the problems that have value. You investigate and you do it in an inclusive way. So do not just speak to the technology people. You speak to people who are in charge of processes, because for you to identify pain points, you have to interrogate processes. If you want to be efficient, one way is, for example, is look at your expenditure, things that are costing you high, and that becomes your target. But there has to be something tangible you're solving that has got evidence that once you've solved it, you do what? You will actually create value. But before you embark on solving that problem, you have to you have to provide a view of all things that could go wrong. So if you speak to frontline staff, they will tell you this could go wrong. If you speak to customers, that's why we're introducing what's called a fourth line of defense. Make sure people validate what you're solving with AI before you actually implement it. Speak to practitioners on what could go wrong, because the controls you're going to put in place will depend on the risks you've identified proactively. And some of them will be about human interaction with the technology. Some of it will be around data. Some of it will be about maybe the customers are just not ready to be using a technology, and therefore do not go ahead with it, or maybe work with them and let them get used to it before you give it to them. So it's about being proactive. We've said, and no offense, the auditing thinking cannot work in AI because the magnitude of what could go wrong with AI is really, really bad. So we're talking about generational issues. We've seen systems that maybe, for example, I think Microsoft had a system that was discriminating against women. And that's the generational impact. You don't want to find out that when it's happening. You want to be proactive in having controls in place. Yeah.
And Mark, a chapter of your book is titled AI for Social Good. Yeah. Would you mind commenting some of those aspects, please?
Yes. So I think commented earlier, we've seen the private sector lead with a lot of solutions because obviously they have to keep on innovating to be able to make their services and products relevant. And AI for social good is the ability to leverage these solutions to solve similar challenges in the social sector. Mostly because most of the time, social sector has limited resources, but also some of these social problems actually make it difficult for other sectors, right? Because if you don't have a healthy nation, you're not going to drive innovations much better. It's going to affect employment. People are not likely to acquire education. People are not able to play a major part in the economy, and therefore it has an impact on the ability for them to afford your services and products. So it's in the interest for every organization not just to think about AI from a product and service, but from a social implication. You have to. We are one of the biggest banks in South Africa. We always say, if we don't have our customers, we're not going to continue being a big bank. So we need them to we need to also empower them from a social perspective, so that, and some of these solutions will become relevant. We've already started discussing with the municipalities and sharing some of the solutions so that they can also benefit on the same effectiveness.
Thank you, Mark. One aspect that we have not yet touched, and it's maybe just mentioned marginally, is in the book, which is relevant to us because we are a scientific institution. Yeah? It's the role of AI in science. Yeah? And I would like to ask Bruce maybe to introduce the topic of AI, maybe for scientific discovery or other scientific uses.
Yes, sure. I mean, I think that's a very exciting opportunity. It's a bit tough maybe to put Mark on the spot. Mark, are there any kind of use cases for scientific research that you think are particularly exciting, perhaps from the social good or from an African perspective, that stand out for you?
So I'm very excited about climate change, the ultimate big data and AI problem. And it's an area that affects all industries and the interconnectedness of industries, and it's a very big opportunity for research, especially in not just creating solutions for climate risk, but also policies that will help organizations, manage the risks much better. We as a country are grey listed. It's also another opportunity because for us to meet those minimum requirements means we have to work smarter. We have to do a lot of monitoring, and technology is at the center of enabling that. It's also another opportunity. So when I did my PhD, in leveraging statistical models to detect fraud. And every single function that requires efficiency is an opportunity for a study because there's certain intricacies that come with the problem itself that requires so much research. And yes, I think those are the areas that I found interesting. I think other industries have similar opportunities.
Thanks, Mark. Maybe I'll use this opportunity to ask another question. I agreed very much when you said that it would be great if we had a tighter collaboration between industry and academia. You pointed out about just how much academic research feeds into industry, specifically in Silicon Valley. From your point of view, what do you think would be the #1 intervention that we in Africa could make, and particularly in South Africa, to build a bridge between industry and research around AI so that we can actually see that transfer being efficient?
I think what we're seeing in industry, a lot of organizations are struggling to put together centers of excellence of practice in AI and machine learning and data science. I think, and I want to focus on universities, is to almost have a model that creates a shared value proposition, and not just a few years ago, we used to come to university to do what? To look for people with skills. We should be coming to look for solutions. So creating an ecosystem where universities also design these solutions and offers them as products and services, and not just research. The other part is to, let's say, drive research on the relevant problems. I think that is a core one, because if you come up, for example, with solutions to the most burning issues, then it creates more reason to drive collaboration. And I think we have a lot of problems. Unless someone tells me we're a very efficient nation, we don't have any challenges, we've got enough problems to focus on and drive that research.
Mark, one issue that worries me a lot is that of AI infrastructure, because it's very good to come up with potential solutions. You need the hardware to run the solution on. How are we doing in that respect?
We're not doing well. In fact, it's the biggest worry we have. We think that even the African Union just published, say, listen, we've got a lot of these big plans. People are putting together frameworks, but you have to resource yourself to make it happen. We were chatting at lunchtime. Australia has 5 supercomputers. The whole of Africa has only 2. Right? How are we going to process a lot of data and run complex algorithms, especially for some of the problems I've seen, language models require so much computing. Also, we've got very many languages, so which means we're going to need more resources to be able to create relevant solutions. So we need to resource, and that will require repurposing budgets, require making tough decisions. Canada just it's #5. And this year alone, they've invested $2-point-something billion just on infrastructure, because they know very well if they don't do that, they will not get their AI opportunity.
Kanshu, please.
So AI infrastructure is, is quite a complex, interconnected problem, right? Um, we haven't solved, maybe we have in the last month or two, the electricity problem, but it's not solved, right? And
Yeah.
and Africa is, there's a lot of energy outage or electricity outage. There's concerns about water. The water usage for some of these solutions is quite heavy. How do you think about all these different interconnected problems? Because you need to solve them all to be able to do AI ultimately, right?
Yes. It's important to get our priorities right because we can't solve everything. And there's certain core areas that we could leverage technology to just become efficient. And energy is one of them. Better planning. We're not talking about complex solutions. It's just understanding the demand for energy, being proactive in predicting failures. When we have an outage of power, it costs us R1 billion a day for the economy. So if we're proactive, we're talking about releasing this R1 billion into the economy, and it's getting, I think, some sort of accountability in things not going wrong. We're not talking about, okay, let's bring autonomous cars. We're just talking about leveraging technology to sort things out, to plan better, to avoid wastage, and that's how we can be an efficient country. Yeah.
I know that predictions are difficult, and in particular about the future. Yeah? but I would like to slowly wrap up because I would like to have a few minutes also for engaging with the audience and asking them if they have some urgent questions. Would each of you like to give us a brief outlook of what the future of AI in South Africa and Africa will be? Positive, negative, difficult, easy?
So I don't think anything is easy. So the future of African AI is really through collaboration, and it's not collaboration just within, let's say, I guess I'm talking about researchers here, but also with private industry, not within themselves, but with other countries, and leveraging what's already been done in the global north. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is that the thing? Yeah. So while we import technology, we need to purpose it for our own unique situation and our context. And we also need to think about data ethics from an African voice, which is different from, I think, data ethics from maybe a global north voice. So we have a chance to create our own narrative, and that narrative can't be created in silos. And I think it's got to be through collaboration.
I think I'm going to catch myself being unnaturally optimistic, but I think AI very soon, meaning in the next years, not decades, is going to unleash an ability for Africans to tell the story about Africa, for us to stop hearing about Africa from Washington and Paris and Beijing and start telling our own story about our resources, our climate, our health, our development, our aspirations in ways that people then, to your point, have to decide to leverage or not for positive change. But I think that possibility to tell our own story is on our doorstep.
So would you like to comment, and then we ask Mark?
Sure. Thanks, Francesco. Yes, I think in terms of making predictions, there are good signs and bad signs. The history of Africa is not one of always jumping and taking the opportunities. But the cell phone revolution, there was a classic leapfrogging example, right? So I think there is the opportunity, a bit like Brian was mentioning, of us using AI to leapfrog. I think that's a very exciting opportunity. Whether we can catch up in terms of the research, that's much harder. But I think having tighter links between research and industry would definitely help that. So I'm also optimistic with some nerves.
Thank you, Bruce. Mark.
Yeah. So I think the future lies on decisions leaders will make today, whether it's in the public sector, whether it's in academia, whether it's in private. It's about the decisions they make, because the decisions of today will affect probably the next 2 or 3 generations. And I'm optimistic because where we are today, we are perfectly well placed to redefine the future with technology, but it will come down to decisions. I'm also very optimistic because we're a very resilient continent. We know how to make things work. And I think young people are also very optimistic. I think research has shown that, the current young generation is very interested in leveraging their skills to solve society problems and not just to make money. So I'm quite optimistic about that. Where I get worried about is when I look at the current trends, is that we don't get things done. We don't implement things. We we, we don't close deals. In terms of, we, we get excited about things and then we forget about them. And it's not just all sectors. Yeah, we get excited about it, but value comes from when you transform, your functions, when you do things differently, and that accountability is required. Yeah.
I'm just concerned about the times, but I wanted to give the audience here and online maybe the opportunity to ask 1 or 2 questions. Please, concise questions, and maybe tell who you want to ask the question to.
So South Africa has quite a big unemployment percentage, and it seems to be increasing. And of course, there's a potential that AI might support this even further. So the first half of the question is, do you not see this as a kind of danger if we very quickly implement AI in terms of unemployment rate? But then the second half is maybe we could use AI for freer education, and so because lack of education is one of the reasons for unemployment. So how would you see the balance of these two? That the question is for the author of the book.
Okay, so if we don't modernize, don't implement AI, people will lose jobs because those organizations will not be able to keep up with providing products and services that customers want. And we're already seeing that, because today the problem with globalization is that you're competing with service providers across the world. I mean, the finance sector, you just need an application to be able to move money around. In fact, people who are offering these services are not from the same industry. So we need to be a bit realistic and tell people the truth. So AI will take a lot of repetitive jobs, and it's already, and actually not jobs, tasks from different functions. But while this change is happening, we're also seeing a lot of new opportunities come at play. I think we need to be at the center of driving that change so that we prepare people and upskill them with skills that are required, and not just in the next 5 years, much more further than that. Then we also need very good AI strategies, because if you have a good strategy, through the process of implementing it, there's a whole lot of opportunities in that ecosystem, and not just building algorithms, ethics. So we're seeing it as a role that has become more prominent. The legal fraternity is now, being reimagined with AI risks as a field, in AI. So there's lots and lots of opportunities. But I think a more realistic one that people have not thought about, we need to start thinking about a universal wage. And the reason is, at some point in time, companies that will flourish will be mostly AI driven. So we're going to have AI economies, and there won't be need for a lot of people, for example, to come to Johannesburg or to come to Cape Town to look for a job. because those opportunities won't be there. So it's a multifaceted approach that must be crafted critically, but well thought, so that we don't position unemployment as a threat, but as an outcome, which is based on how we strategize.
Any other question?
This question is not limited to any continent, I think. But the answer from the African point of view could be exciting, perhaps. So the question is, what is, in your opinion, the impact of AI on opinion formation?
On opinion formation. So, and I'm hoping you're talking about information creation. Okay. So, yes. All right. So I get, yes. So I think, so we've got capabilities today that have been built around information that is available across the world. The capabilities have a lot of promise, but that is a positive side. Automating ability to access information globally, but also the web is full of toxic information. It's full of disinformation. The two biggest risks the World Economic Forum classified this year was misinformation and disinformation, including the ability to contaminate data, which could lead to wrong opinions. So there's a critical responsibility on the users of technology to make sure they have controls to validate opinions, but also they have to take responsibility of the cost of leveraging those opinions and making decisions with them. When ChatGPT was launched, we saw that it was very easy to get instructions on how to make a bomb, or even how to commit suicide, right? So we're going to see a lot of disinformation and misinformation too, especially like when the year where we've got a lot of elections to sway public opinion. And it's very easy to do that today because now you've got a capability that allows you to engineer information that will infer certain opinions or public perception on topics that leaders want to people want to know about. So it's got an upside and a downside, but the downside is much more costly because it impacts most of the time society and not necessarily the people driving the narrative. So, and you'll see like a lot of organizations like ourselves, we've actually blocked ChatGPT because of the same things. Naturally, people always want to get things done quickly so that they can go home. So it also attracts a bit of bad behaviors because, for example, you want to get a quick opinion without validating it. If the technology was not there, you would have actually just done your job properly instead of relying on an opinion. Yeah.
But now I know why you use Meta.
Yeah.
One last question to finish on a positive note. Sibu.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for Mark for the presentation. I just wanted to ask in terms of issues around equality, access and gender equality. So from the work that you're doing, how do you make sure that you're inclusive in the use of this technology? Because currently, even if you look at the panel that we have there in front, the opinions only come from one set, from what I see. So the issue around equality and representation, and the issues around skill training, because as far as I read, I see that we are currently users of technology, but not so much on the development side. So if you can just touch that and how you see ourselves making our society sustainable by bringing in more players rather than just one voice? Thank you.
So that's a tough question, but I think inclusion and equality is everyone's business. We as leaders, for example, in the organization I come from, it's part of our accountability to have diverse teams. Also, we monitor decisions from solutions that we make. And it's very easy when you look at what's happening around the world that teams that are diverse and are representative come up with very better solutions. Also, customers are heterogeneous, so they connect much more with organizations that are representative. But we have that accountability. In fact, it's part of our scorecards that you have to have an inclusive team. You are right, the technology fraternity has got a very big problem with underrepresentation of women and minorities for a long time. I even think, if I'm not wrong, in a lot of countries, regulators are now asking for the profiles of teams, of data science teams, to make sure that they are representative. But we are very, very strict on making sure that teams are representative because it's got a very big downside effect.
Yeah, thank you, Sibu, for addressing that thorny issue. Yeah. So all good things come to an end. And I think we interrogated Mark long enough for this afternoon. So thank you, Mark, very much for coming the long way from Johannesburg. Yeah. And in order to thank you, we would like to give you a copy of a magazine
Thank you
to
so much.
promote mathematics in schools that NITheCS publishes. Yeah.
No, thank you so much.
Quick
Yes,
photo.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, from my side, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here, Francesco, NITheCS, and the Stellenbosch community. I'm really, really honored to have joined you today. I wish I was staying down this side of. I will be enjoying the walk and the fresh streets, But I appreciate you joining us today and discussing AI. I think this is not an end of a conversation. I think it's a beginning of many conversations so that we can all help create a future we want. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And we need to thank also Kanshu, Brian, and Bruce. Yeah, thank you very much for your contribution. And Bruce, stay online 1 more minute because we need a group photo. And thank you very much to the audience.